All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome back to ABNY's special series with the candidates for mayor. We enjoyed the conversation we had with Zoran Mondani last week and look forward to welcoming the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, on the 21st. With us today is our Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa. Thank you for being here. And I can promise you one thing, if I've learned from our conversations with Curtis, today will not be dull. I appreciate you being here. So I grew up watching Curtis on the 11 o'clock news and on the streets. He's been a part of the fabric of our city's civic life for a long, long time, ever since he and the Guardian Angels started showing up on the subways at a time when our city was in terrible crisis. We often wax nostalgic about the origin story of ABNY, but Curtis is another part of that wider New York moment, a time when ordinary New Yorkers stepped up in different ways to try and make our city safe and livable. It's easy to see the red beret and think he is just an eccentric New Yorker. But in our last mayoral election, Curtis threw his hat in the ring and pulled 28% of the vote, and that's something. A political outsider, he's got ideas that range from common sense to a little out there, like mobilizing an army of feral cats to solve our city's rat problem, and I want to say that might actually work. We're going to go a lot deeper on those policies today. I said it last week when the Assembly member, Mondani, was here with us. We don't always agree, but as ABNY, we are always rooting for the success of whoever's elected mayor, and we're always ready to partner with anyone who cares about the welfare of our city. As a student of politics, I think there's something really important about Curtis's candidacy. It may feel like a leap to think that a Republican could be elected mayor at this moment in New York City, but remember, a Republican has won 5 out of the last 10 mayoral elections in this town. Curtis' candidacy is one chance someone has on a big stage to talk about what it means to be a Republican in New York City in 2025. He's not Donald Trump, he's not Rudy Giuliani, he's not Mike Bloomberg, but there are aspects of each of him in his style and in his politics. I want to thank him for making time with us, talk about his policies and his plans. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Curtis Sliwa.
Thank you all for coming today. I actually had a previous engagement with some of your executive committee. We had quite a good time as we went down memory lane. Since I am the real genuine New Yorker in this campaign and can reflect on many situations that have occurred before and compare them to this time in which many of the same situations are reoccurring. As you can see, I am here minus my beret. When I appeared before your executive committee, I didn't wear a beret. Obviously, when I'm in the streets or the subways, I wear that iconic symbol because it has represented to people for many, many years the service that the Guardian Angels have provided as volunteers, coming to people's aid when they're in distress, serving the homeless and the emotionally disturbed when others failed them. And most importantly, what people don't realize, even though we're an international organization now, having existed in 13 countries, over 130 cities, we've had 6 Guardian Angels killed in the line of duty, 3 dozen seriously injured. So I wear it in tribute to their contribution. But today, I come without the beret, as I have often since, and I made the pledge to the voters. And it will be the voters who determine who the next mayor is on November 4th, because it's the people who get to make that determination. I have said if that beret is such a detriment to your thought process in determining who is the best person to lead us as our next mayor in New York City, I make this vow. I'll never wear that red beret again if you elect me mayor of the city of New York. We'll put that red beret in storage. But this is about making for a better New York. And I look at it a lot differently than my 2 adversaries. I look at it from the bottom up. Oftentimes, they talk about it from the top down. On any given day, I'm walking up 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue, which is well trafficked, as you know, by not just those who live and reside in New York City, but those who travel here to work, and many of the tourists that we are dependent on to fuel our economy. And I see time and time again garbage-strewn streets, side locations that are filled with trash. I have to walk blocks from time to time and carrying trash that I pick up along the way. I can't even find a wastebasket to put it in. And you say, this is one of the most well-trafficked streets in New York City. This is the visual image that a lot of people are impacted with on a normal basis. And unlike when I was growing up, we now have business improvement districts. We have ancillary groups that actually are there to do maintenance. And I saw that when Jessica Tisch was the sanitation commissioner, she took half the trash baskets off the street corners, which has led to more trash, more rats, more debris, and less sanitation pickups. When I venture into the subways, I am the only candidate who actually campaigns in the subways on an everyday basis. I go from platform to platform. There are 472 platforms. And again, I see that the MTA has removed trash barrel after trash barrel with the assumption that people are going to somehow, if they're underground, carry the trash topside and then go on a search and find mission to find a wastebasket. Simple thing like that. Common sense, which seems to be devoid in governmental thinking. You know, they think that they know what average, everyday working class people go through. And because I spend so much of my time in the subways, in the streets, talking to average people who both live here, travel here, and even the tourists who flock here, I find from them what most disturbs them. This is a week in which it is very personal for me. It's the one-year anniversary when my son Anthony, my oldest son of 3, was viciously beaten in a gang attack in the most unlikely of places, the Upper East Side, off the corner of 96th and 2nd Avenue, while walking his dog in the company of his stepfather, former Governor David Paterson. A gang viciously attacked him and stomped him multiple times. He could easily have been impaired for life or maybe even possibly killed, like we saw just last week at J Street Borough Hall at Metrotech, when that Italian immigrant from Bari, Italy, simply using the mass transit system that at one time was the safest and most effective means of transportation in the world, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, was stomped on repeatedly, 15 times or more. Nobody intervened. All the technology was there. That's the former headquarters of the MTA. So they all saw it on film. A police station that was just a block away. And this poor man ended up dying on his way to the hospital. We found out that the suspect who was responsible for this, another emotionally disturbed man who should not have been out in the streets and the subways of New York. He was a threat to himself and everyone else. Turns out, since 2019, he had committed a series of crimes and was constantly being turned out into the streets because of the no cash bail provision, implemented by Governor Cuomo and supported by my other adversary, Zohran Mamdani. And we see this over and over and over. And on the day he was arrested the night later in Times Square, while possessing a samurai sword, who knows, maybe to do even more damage. Luckily, the transit police collared him. He had 5 open cases that had not even been completed. 33 times he had been arrested, clearly emotionally disturbed. And a man who will have a wake in Bensonhurst on Friday and a funeral mass and burial in Middle Village on Saturday becomes another casualty. Reminds me of the case of Debrina Kwan, how quickly we want to forget her name, who on the morning of December 22nd, homeless on an F train in Coney Island, Stillwell Avenue, the last stop of the FD, the N, and the Q, was sitting there. She had come from Toms River, New Jersey, had ventured into New York City with a series of emotional issues that were causing her to become homeless. She was destitute. We put her in a shelter in the South Bronx, a all-female shelter. She was ill-prepared to deal with the clients there. They ended up beating her, robbing her, taking everything that she had. And she fled where most homeless people flee, when they can't stay in the shelter systems, which is you can call it an industrial complex of nonprofits that run them but don't provide a safe environment for their clients. She ran to where I saw so many of their clients stay, in a subway car, and had been there for weeks until eventually a migrant that morning, who we were housing at $400 a night in East New York at Samaritan House, providing him with all of the culturally appropriate food, decided that he would set her on fire, which he did. She twisted in the wind. He then fanned the flames. He sat there on a bench like a pyromaniac, watching what had transpired. Police officers ran back and forth looking for a fire extinguisher that was non-existent. They didn't know what to do. They hadn't been trained to deal with that. I had been trained like others of my generation, baby boomers in junior high school, Bildersley Junior High School. When you see somebody on fire, you lay them on the ground and you roll them over. You try to put out the flames. None of that was even attempted. Grown men were standing on the platform with their iPhones and smartphones filming it so it could go live at 5. A complete catastrophe, a failure of the system. And in that particular instance, we already had 750 National Guardsmen who had been assigned to the subway crime crisis that Governor Hochul had responded to. From that date forward, she assigned an additional 250 National Guardsmen. So when it's brought up from the Trump administration, or that maybe he'll send National Guards persons in to the city of New York to deal with whatever prevailing crime problem we have, it's already been done by Governor Kathy Hochul. And yet, to have to listen to this mayor continue to tell us it is a perception of crime is an insult to each and every New Yorker who has to either walk the streets, use the subways, the buses, or the express buses, and particularly for women. The very first TV commercial that I put on that aired involved my wife, Nancy, who is an attorney. She's a millennial. And she spoke of all the horrors that women go through on a regular basis, how they're being sexually harassed, preyed upon, how they feel constantly that they're not safe and secure, both in the streets and in the subways, and particularly at night. And we look to the fact that they are the number one workers in New York City now. It's women who are the workers. Women, in many instances, who are at home, who are the single parents, providing not just for themselves, but for their children, sometimes having to work 2 jobs. Women who not only manage and own and work in our various nightlife facilities, our bars, our restaurants, our nightclubs, but consistently have told me and my wife, I can no longer afford taking a yellow cab, an Uber, or a Lyft. It's cost prohibitive. The fear of crime and the reality of crime needs to be addressed. No citizen that I've spoken to in the 350 neighborhoods that I've gone into, because that's what comprises the 5 boroughs of the city of New York, has ever approached me to chastise me or say, you know, Curtis, you're really embellishing this. It really has gotten a lot better. I've yet to have one person. And remember, I probably meet more citizens within the course of a day than both campaigns combined of my adversaries. They're obviously campaigning. We're going to have our debate tomorrow night, one of 2 debates. And hopefully that will enlighten people as to the stand that I take versus Zoran Mandami and Andrew Cuomo. I can tell you that crime is a very important issue. And both Andrew Cuomo and Zoran Mandami share the same views. They are protecting the violators, the perps. I am protecting the victims. Each and every day I walk up and down the streets of Manhattan. Storefront after storefront after storefront is now covered with that chintzy brown paper wrap that we used to cover our school books with when we'd get them on the first day of class in public school. It's ugly. It indicates that there's a deterioration, that there's a flight of small business, mid-sized business, and large business, and we see that in the stats. And that's not from the fright of Zoran Mandami. That is a continuation of what has been transpiring. Now, what has contributed to that? Congestion pricing has been an absolute disaster. All you have to do is approach the merchants, the men and women who had these shops for many, many years, And they'll tell you, ever since that tax was imposed, $9, and we know it's going to be $8, and probably soon after that, $36, because it never reaches a plateau. It always increases. The men and women who poured all of their resources into these shops have told me that they could no longer afford to stay open because they didn't have enough foot traffic. And they point to one of the reasons: congestion pricing. Last year, the Citizens Budget Committee indicated that we suffered $1 billion of various forms of fare fee evasion, most of it in the subways and buses. I laugh when Zoran Mandami says, "Oh, free fare on the buses." I'm on the city buses all the time. I'm on Highland Boulevard in Staten Island. I don't see anybody paying. I'm on the Webster Avenue line in the Bronx. I don't see anybody paying. Half the people don't even pay their fare to begin with. And there are all kinds of remedies to that if you're indigent and poor. There's half fare. There's a third fare. The programs exist. If you don't avail yourself of it, when you are guilty of fare evasion, there have to be consequences. Because if people begin to realize that you're not paying, well, then why should they pay? You see that in the subways, where a third of the people are going under the turnstile, over the turnstile, and through the gates. There's no enforcement. We see a bunch of young men and young women who are employed as private security officers, and they're attempting to impede the flow. But it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Now, the question here is, are you going to have a free subway system and a free bus system? Because whether Zoran Mandami is able to do it or not, if in fact he becomes mayor, where is the revenue going to come from? Where is the resource going to come from? Reality is hitting hard. The Trump administration is cutting back funds. They've already done it with Medicaid. They've done it with food stamps. The new Secretary of HUD came in and said there are going to be massive cuts to the NYCHA budget. We got to wake up. That money is not there. Tom DiNapoli, not a Republican, our state controller, has said we have a $36 billion looming budget gap in the state budget. Kathy Hochul in the state legislature has to deal with that. They must balance their books. That will mean in the trickle down to every city, every town, every village, every borough in the state of New York, there'll be less money than was initially promised. And that includes what was promised to New York City. And then, of course, there is the New York City budget itself, bloated. $118 billion election budget that Eric Adams was hoping would get him reelected instead of being one and done as he is now. And you look, $41 billion in loan, Department of Education. What are we getting as a result? What are the teachers getting in the classroom? What are the children getting in the classroom? 100,000 less students. Every day, 1/3 of the children are truants, and there's no attempt to get them back into the classroom. By 4th grade, 2/3 of the children are incapable of reading, writing, or doing arithmetic at grade level. It's a catastrophe. And yet we're spending more and more and more and more. We've just had a debate about gifted and talented. Obviously, we need more slots for that. But I'll tell you this, we need to offer that to all 75,000 of the children who are enrolled in pre-K, not just to selective areas where the educators at the Department of Education believe that a number of children will qualify. My 2 youngest sons, their mother is Melinda Katz, who is the Democratic District Attorney of Queens, lifelong Democrat. Both of them attempted to get into gifted and talented. I remember sitting in the assembly hall of the local school before both of them had to go into the back and be tested by the age of 4. They did not qualify. I realized the pressure was intense. And I told both my sons, who have done very well since, there are other opportunities academically to achieve. It's not just through gifted and talented. I would like every child to have that capability, especially in the poor and impoverished areas, the areas that we believe children would not be capable of qualifying. I don't care if they're 2 or 3 or 4. Those children should be guaranteed that same opportunity. But what isn't being spoken about is the mass majority of young adults in our school system need skills. When I was going to school, there were 3 types of diplomas. It was a general diploma in the public school system. Pretty much if you could inhale or exhale and you got kicked upstairs through social promotion. That was a complete disaster. That was changed. Then there was the academic diploma. You had to get your Regents credits. Then there was the vocational diploma. I've had thousands of guardian angels who have come through the ranks of the various patrols that I've run in all 5 boroughs. Many of them benefited from going to some of the best vocational high schools in the United States. They learned all kinds of trades and skills that have basically helped them throughout their life, not only as plumbers, electricians, and carpenters, but other skill levels that are in demand now that we don't seem to be able to produce enough of the skilled level force to satisfy the needs of business, whether it's in the construction industry or it's in the industry base itself. Home health care aides. There's a growing demand. We're all aging out. I'm probably closer to that age than many of you in this room. And I must tell you, having gone through that ordeal with my mother, Francesca, who suffered from dementia in her final years like so many others, it was better that she stayed at home and had a nursing home care aide, but not one who had minimal skills, who had compassion but had few other skills. We have a whole demand for home health care workers that we could meet with the growing number of young men and young women who could be trained in that field, who would be needed to go into people's homes where they would much rather stay than long-term nursing home care units or, God forbid, a hospital itself. The cost of that would be prohibitive. And yet we don't seem to be focused on the needs of the mass majority of young people in our school system. It is vital. Many of you obviously know the importance of Broadway and off-Broadway, the musical and the plays that attract people from all over the United States and the world to this great city. I remember as a child, after watching Joe Franklin at night on Channel 9, the superstation out of Secaucus, there would always be advertisements for the Milford Plaza to entice people from around the country to come in, plan an entire weekend where they would shop, where they would go to a play, or they would go to a musical, where they would spend their money and have the experience that only one could get in New York City. And then what happened? We turned the Milford Plaza into a migrant hotel, $400 a night. We cleared out many of the other hotels to house migrants. And I was one of the few who said, we spent $7 billion of money from our budget for people we didn't even know. And yet every day I am dealing with men and women, mostly African Americans, who are living in the subways, living in the streets, living in the parks, many of them veterans. And we spend almost nothing comparable to care for them. Now that the migrant situation has abated, many of them have integrated into the fabric of our society. Many of them have become essential workers. I think it's time that we refocus on the most needy of all New Yorkers. I see my 2 adversaries, Zoran Mandami and Andrew Cuomo, they're throwing out their chests. You're a macho man. I'm going to take on Donald Trump. Oh, no, I'm tougher. I'm tougher than you. Oh. The tough guy on the stage on Thursday is Curtis Sliwa. But you don't have to say you're a tough guy. But we need a mayor in New York City now in the aftermath of Eric Adams and the disaster he brought onto us with the corruption and the lack of transparency and the fact that so many people who voted for him against me the first time felt forsaken. Is a mayor who's compassionate, caring, and considerate of our fellow human beings. I don't see that being exemplified. Both those candidates, they have their priorities, they have their population groups that they're focused on, in which they feel they can color vote. I understand that. That's the body politic. I recognize that many of the people that I focus on are not going to vote. They don't even know how to vote. They're incapable because they're not in control of their mental or physical faculties, but there is nobody speaking on their behalf. I live with them every day. I deal with them every day. New Yorkers shield their eyes from them. They don't want to deal with the enormity of the problem. And they think it can be shuttled from place to place. It cannot. I will be a mayor that prioritizes their needs because that's what a compassionate society is. On another level, Recently, the President of the United States made fun of my wife Nancy and myself because we've devoted a good deal of our life to rescuing dogs and cats and animals who have been abandoned. I felt the President obviously didn't understand how many of our fellow New Yorkers are involved in that, no matter what their politics is. I remember sitting with Kathy Wild before she began her retirement process from the Partnership from New York. By my side was state leader of the GOP, Ed Cox, who was not necessarily a believer in the independent line that my wife had set up for me, first ever in the history of electoral politics: protect animals, which calls for no-kill shelters and put animal abusers in jail. And Catherine Wild, as professional, as skilled, as accomplished a female executive that has existed in our city and beyond, said, "You know, Ed, I have 23 rescue cats and 6 rescue dogs." And Ed Cox almost fell off his chair. That is the one thing that brings us all together, is our love of animals. The great Mahatma Gandhi said, "A society that does not take care of its animals does not take care of its people." Look at our city. Maybe you don't want to see what I see on an everyday basis. Our city does not take care of its people. We give a lot of lip service to it. We talk now in this political season of all the money we're going to spend that just is not there to be spent. I'm the only candidate in this race who says we have to use fiscal restraint. We've got to cut taxes. The property tax is up to 20%. It's driving people out of our city, especially the blue-collar working-class people in the outer boroughs that I have regular contact with, that the other two candidates have sparing contact with. They are homeowners. Many of them live in the buildings that they own and operate. They're not absentee landlords. And they realize that they're at a point that fiscally they're at a breaking point. There are fees, there are fines, there are speed cameras, there are attempts to pick your pockets from basically the cradle to the grave. They just can't afford to live in New York City any longer. That's why I've dedicated my campaign this time, as I did the first time, to improve, don't move. I said that against Eric Adams. I told all of you in 2 debates that he would be corrupt and there would be chaos. And now I have people coming up to me. We should have listened to you, Curtis. We should have listened to you. Look at the debacle we're in now. Well, I'm not asking you to listen to me. I'm asking people to vote for me. And yet I've heard a chorus of people out there. "Oh, you need to drop out. You need to drop out." Oh, really? June 24th, Andrew Cuomo failed in his responsibility to run a decent race against Zoran Mandami and his other competitors. Failed miserably. Ran a horrible race. Apparently was allergic to people. Had very controlled events. And acted like he thought that he was entitled to a coronation. Well, oh boy. The progressive wing of his party gave him a blanket party, as we call it. He was so traumatized that night, on the night of the election results, he tossed in the towel, remember? Because he knew the ranked choice voting would make a bad situation worse, and it did. Andrew Cuomo, who was supposed to be coronated 2 months before in the primaries, 40 points ahead, lost by 13 points. And then the chorus came. "You got to drop out, Curtis." For who? Oh, the revived, the revitalized, back from the dead, Eric Adams. I say, you got to be kidding. Did you see who he brought back in his first press conference? All of his crooked cronies, including the potato chip lady, Winnie Greco. Are you out of your mind? So the arsonist is now the firefighter. And everybody, "Oh, you got to drop out." And the pressure was intense. You got to drop out. I said, I'm the mainstream candidate other than Zoran Mandami, who won the Democratic primary fair and square. I'm on the second line. I lead the Republican ticket. So then all of a sudden, a few weekends ago, Eric Adams was one and done. He dropped out. The price was right, whatever his price was. And so that left 3. And the same chorus of sirens. "You got to drop out, Curtis. Oh, for the good of New York City." You're selfish. Curtis Sliwa is selfish? I shot 5 times on the orders of Gotti Sr., the Gotti Jr., and the Gambino crime family. I never had private security before armed security guards. Never, even after that. I poured my sweat and tears into the city that I love. Every day, not just some of the days. Born in New York, almost killed in New York. I'll die in New York. I'll be buried in New York. To be called selfish? Excuse me, there's something called an election. And now that I've been bribed to drop out of the race, you can't bribe me, you can't buy me, you can't lease me. There's no way you're going to influence me with money. I and my wife get threatened. Threatened. Zohran Mamdani has been threatened. We got to lower this rhetoric. Because whoever becomes the next mayor of the city of New York, and I truly believe in my heart of hearts, I have the pathway to victory with my coalition. I have double the number of donors of Andrew Cuomo, 15,000. I've raised millions in matching funds. I've opened up my 11th headquarters. 11 headquarters. I don't see any headquarters for the other candidates. Posters galore. What would I tell my enthusiastic supporters who believe I'm their law and order candidate, and that Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo will fail us on a number of levels, including with law and order? What do I tell them? I'm going to drop out for Andrew Cuomo? How about this novel idea? How about we let the people choose the next mayor? Not the billionaires, not the professional political class, people. I'm one of the people. I called myself the people's mayor. I trust the people. I don't trust the billionaires. I don't trust the professional political class. I am Curtis Sliwa, Republican populist representing working class people who's also running on the independent Protect Animals line. And I believe I will have enough votes to become the next mayor. And should I be wrong, unlike Andrew Cuomo, who told his friends in the Hamptons he would flee to Florida, I stay, I fight for what I think is right, to improve, not move, and to represent those interests that will continue to stay with me and fight for the return of New York City, the survival of New York City, the renewal and revival of New York City that I was born in and will end up being buried in, because I am the true New Yorker in this race. Thank you. Additions to the Q train. We don't need this 3 additional Q train stations. There's no clamoring for that. That was basically put together by Kathy Hochul. Helps for her union support next year when she faces Elise Stefanik. But it does absolutely nothing for our mass transit system, which is falling apart. I would have much preferred if money was available to invest in the present infrastructure. But you would go to Washington, or you would meet with the people who were delegated to deal with this and say, okay, I understand you're going to cut the budget, but how about you maintain that gateway which transports millions and millions of people up the Northeast Corridor from Washington, D.C. to Boston each and every day? Because if we don't have those new tunnels, we know with global warming and climate change, a Republican who believes in global warming and climate change, that it's just a matter of when those tunnels that we now have no longer can function and will cease to exist. So again, negotiation, conversation. Don't push your chest out to Donald Trump. I've known him. I've had a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump for many, many years. You can't win that one. But I see Andrew Cuomo saying he's going to be the tough guy, Zoran Mandami. Yeah, and you know who pays the price? The citizens of New York City. And then you know what they say? Well, we blame it on Trump. No. There's room to negotiate.
At the moment, is that relationship with Trump love or hate?
I don't know. Donald Trump doesn't talk to me. He seems to talk with everyone else. He saved Eric Adams, who should have been in jail with Bobby Menendez, goldball Bobby Menendez. Let me take just a moment. There was in the Department of Justice the Integrity Unit. These men and women were dedicated. They don't make a lot of money. Dedicated to rooting out corruption in our political system. And then, if you remember, the mass resignations because the Department of Justice, through Trump, saved Eric Adams. Eric Adams committed those acts of political corruption against me when he was running against me in 2021. I'm personally aware of the straw donors that he utilized to collect millions and millions of dollars. That's why from the CFP, he can't get any more matching funds. And they gave up their careers. Think of all of you. They took a principled stand. How many people in our lives take a principled stand to give up their entire careers because they realized we were trying to control now the Department of Justice for friends and obviously use it against foes? And boy, when I saw those men and women dedicated, resign, I said, I stand with the men and women of principle, because Eric Adams should have been before a jury of his peers, and they should have determined whether he was guilty or innocent.
You talked a bit about you're getting some pressure to leave the race. I want to ask that question. I want to put a finer point on it. You look at the polling, and I guess would you stay in the race if you saw your polling said you were a spoiler that enable? I don't want to take a leap, but I'm going to go with your policy is closer to Andrews than it is to Zoran's. Is that a reasonable assumption or no?
No, you couldn't be more hopelessly wrong.
Not the first time, certainly not the last.
Me and Andrew Cuomo, his policies are closer than Zoran Mandami. Let me run down a few. Zoran Mandami and Andrew Cuomo believe that migrants should vote. I say no. They believe in a sanctuary city. I say no, although I would have put it up for charter revision. I trust people. I would have let people vote on it, which is what people wanted from Eric Adams, but he wouldn't permit it. They are for no cash bail. I say no. Obviously, no cash bail has been a nemesis to our public safety. They were for raise the age. I say no. And up until the other day, the author of the attempt to close Rikers Island, Andrew Cuomo, insulted all of us by basically saying, no, I want to keep Rikers Island open. I was stunned. Do you think we're all stupid? Let me tell you, I've known a lot of Democrats and I've known a lot of Republicans. And what they've told me is something I don't abide by. Curtis, these people, they're sheep. They need sheep herders. Whatever we say 5 seconds ago, 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago, 5 weeks ago, 5 months ago, 5 years ago, they'll forget. Just reinvent yourself. I say, oh, you really believe that? My fellow Republicans, you really believe? Oh, yeah. I don't believe that. I trust people. When he said that, that was an insult to all of us. He could have said, I've changed my mind since. The community jails that are already being built, $8 billion. The budget is now $16 billion and growing like anything else that's ever a New York City project or New York State project. But that was an insult. So they share so many similar policies that I'm opposed. I'm the only clear candidate that differs from them on almost every instance. To me, Andrew Cuomo is really Zoran Mandami light, and he's trying to morph more and more to the Zoran Mandami position. Remember that great Eminem song, Will the Real Eminem Please Stand Up, Please Stand Up? Will the real Andrew Cuomo please stand up, please stand up? I don't know who he is. I get vertigo every day he talks.
All right, so then clearly you're saying you are not getting out of this race.
George Pataki is my number one mentor. Back in 1994, November 2nd, there was no early voting. The polls said that George Pataki would lose to the better Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, by 14 points. Election night, he won by 3 points. Should I trust the polls? Should my followers trust the polls? The polls have been wrong time and time again. They were wrong about Trump and Harris. They were wrong about Cuomo versus the progressives. When have they been right? And yet some of you say, oh, the numbers. Well, guess what? If you had to invest based on the polls, you'd be broke. You'd be in the poorhouse. You'd be in a shelter in New York City, probably ending up riding the subway to remain safe and secure.
You talked a lot about the problems we face, and you talk about the things that are broken. And we appreciate that. Certainly public safety is a big issue for us. Education is a big issue for us. What's the Curtis Sliwa positive vision of our city? What is the thing you say, I want to give New Yorkers this so that our future is bright again?
Good. Hire 7,000 police officers, but you can't just hire 7,000 police officers. They're not going to join because they've been stripped of the insurance that all civil servants have. It's called qualified immunity. It was done by the state legislature. Cuomo at the time said nothing. It was done by City Council, 2021. Adams said nothing. Men and women are not joining the police department because they fear being personally sued. They're not being recommended by fathers and mothers and grandparents who served very valiantly in the police department. It was always been a tradition, you should consider joining the police department. We must address that issue. We need 40,000 police officers to make people feel safe and secure. We need the homeless outreach unit that used to exist before Bill de Blasio took $1 billion out of the budget while members of the city council were dancing the tarantella. I met these men and women. They were police officers dedicated. And guess what? They had medical health care nurses with them. We talk about, we should have medical health care nurses with the police officers. I agree with that. We already did it, and it was extraordinarily effective, and then it was disbanded. With Thrive, de Blasio never did it. Eric Adams never did it. Cuomo actually cut beds in the mental health care facilities from when he was governor from 40,000 to 4,000. That's why we see many of these people who are disabled mentally who are roaming the streets and living in our subways. So me, it would be a priority. And then lastly, wouldn't it be nice to see transit cops actually patrolling up and down the subway trains to give you a feeling of comfort? I mean, imagine if you're a victim of crime. You have to get out on a platform and find a police officer in a borough you may not even be familiar with. No, you need the police back on the trains. And in terms of where I believe we can recapture a lot of the young people who are not returning to school, we have so many young men and women that I remember when I went to school and we had after-school center and night center and weekend center. I'm going to keep the public schools open all weekend long and also available to teach new-coming immigrants English, which is a vital necessity for them to assimilate. Why are our public schools basically closed by 5 o'clock? I went to after-school center. I went to night center. I went to weekend center. 5% of us were jocks. You know what the other 95% of the children and young adults were there to do? Culture, arts, music, plays. They were given instruments. They were in band. They were in orchestra. We don't do that any longer. It's almost like we've shut down all the cultural attractions. We now have people want to do podcasts. They want to learn the technology of this generation, and we don't have a viable outlet for them. I'm telling you, if we had more of that available, more of those young people would willingly come into school each and every day, looking forward to that. We have stripped cultural entities from our local public school, junior high school systems, unless you go to a specialized school. Shame on us for doing that. It helped my generation and so many who have fond memories of that. I'm going to put that all back into place. Imagine a public school that's in every neighborhood that's actually available to the people in the community 7 days a week, about 18 hours a day. Wouldn't that be nice that we actually use the facilities that we've invested so much money into?
Thank you for that. There was a story yesterday about a group chat of young Republican leaders, including some from New York, and in it, the leaked text included someone saying they loved Hitler, putting opponents in a gas chamber, exalting rape, and applauding slavery, using the N-word. It was awful. Can I just ask, what do you say about that? You know, as a Democrat, as the Republican candidate for.
These tended to be mostly young men, some from around the country, some from New York State. Obviously, there's no way you can justify any of that. They will all suffer consequences now. I believe some of them were actually employed and were representatives of elected officials. And they will have to live with that stigma for a long, long time of why they so callously and indifferently maligned people, made fun of people, used the kind of language that you didn't even think was in the common discourse of people who are politically involved. Look, we've seen situations on the left and the right. Hate. Yeah, on the right, on the left. My answer to that kind of hate speech is more free speech. More free speech. But when you use speech that obviously is a reflection on your party affiliation and others affiliated to you, there are consequences. Hopefully, they'll all apologize en masse, learn from these horrible mistakes, move on with their lives, put everything back together again, and understand the horrible, horrible harm that they've caused, not just themselves, their families, the party, the Republican Party, because it's a stigma, obviously, by what they did, but also to get their lives back. I don't want to see their lives destroyed. Everybody's made mistakes. I've made mistakes. Zoran Mandami's made mistakes. Andrew Cuomo's made mistakes. Eric Adams made mistakes. It's a question of whether you apologize for your mistakes. There's some people who will never apologize for their mistakes, like Andrew Cuomo, the 15,000 who died as a result of his executive order. I've been with those families, crying, said, please look at us. Please, Andrew, address her. He won't even look at them. Cold-hearted. We don't need cold-hearted people to be the next mayor of the city of New York. You got to apologize when you make mistakes. I apologize every day. The best thing that ever happened to me was my wife, Nancy. I got to tell you, I apologize to her 3 times a day and don't even realize sometimes what a stupid thing I just said. And she'll give me constructive criticism. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was pretty dumb to say.
You've said a lot about one of your competitors. You've said a lot about Andrew Cuomo. I want to ask a question sort of about Zoran, but really about the Democratic Socialists, which is a very strong affiliation of his. Talk to me about how you see the Democratic Socialists. Talk to me about how you see their rise and their role in the city and state.
I'm a student of history. The biggest Democratic Socialist of America was David Dinkins. You know that? David Dinkins. I was involved in Rudy's campaign, the first one. He lost. The second one, and we won. He was on the Liberal Party line of Ray Harding, and I would say to Rudy, you're no liberal. He would call David Dinkins the limousine liberal, and he would say, oh, well, he's a proud member of the DSA. And it turned out he was right. I don't fear socialists. Socialists have been part of our political fabric for years. We've had communists who were elected to city council. Fiorello LaGuardia was a Republican liberal supported by the American Labor Party, socialists. I don't fear them. What I want is to engage them in debate because I don't believe in their policies. But they've taken over the Democratic Party. And let me just give you a little thumbnail sketch. Bernie Sanders has never been a Democrat. I remember sitting with him at the University of Vermont when I was giving a speech, and he was the congressman, 2 Brooklyn boys talking. I said, Bernie, you're not a Democrat. You were the mayor of Burlington. Never will be a Democrat. They embraced him. Then AOC went out there with her followers, worked hard, and kicked Joe Crowley's butt, who never campaigned. And by the way, he never had a challenging campaign since he was assemblyman and congressman because he was Tommy Manton's golden child. So he never had a tough campaign. So he thought he could just sail through. AOC, fair and square, beat him decisively. And then that was 2018. 2019. Somebody I know well, Melinda Katz. She was chosen by the county to replace D.A. Brown, who had passed away, right? Guaranteed, slam dunk. You know Melinda, moderate, Democrat, Jewish mother of my 2 youngest sons that I share with her. She had been assemblywoman. She had been city councilwoman, chairwoman of land use, borough president, right? Slam dunk, right? Should have been a slam dunk, Queens, against Tiffany Caban, who wasn't even a city councilwoman at that time. She was an advocate for accused rights. They debated. On election night, you know who won that election? Tiffany Caban. I had warned Melinda and her followers. I said, I see these Democratic Socialists out there, and you know who was leading them? Zoran Mandami. That's when I actually first met him. We never had a conversation, but now I realize that was Zoran Mandami organizing. See, I'm an organizer myself. I may disagree with you, but when I see you out there organizing good old-fashioned retail politics, you're giving out literature, you're door knocking, you're making phone calls, you've got an exuberant following. Melinda Katz won by 12 votes because there were 3,000 absentee ballots. And everybody in Queens was shocked in 2019. Did the Democrats do anything? No. Did they challenge the Democratic Socialists of America who were running candidates in primaries? No. They basically said, okay, we won't challenge you, you don't challenge us. And they kept trying to recruit Republicans. Remember, they were spending millions of dollars in 2021. Please become Hessians and mercenaries for us. We're so afraid of the DSA. And I would say, that's your problem. You've surrendered to them. You're not willing to battle them. And they did it again this year, $7 million, trying to convince mostly Jewish Republicans to convert to Democrats to obviously help Andrew Cuomo beat the progressives. How did that work out? How about moderate Democrats? You fight your own battles because now the socialists are an integral part of your party. Deal with it. We have Republican Party values that are completely different than theirs. That's why we're going to give people a choice in this election. You have the faded Andrew Cuomo represents the old, Zoran Mandami represents the new, and I am the guardian of tradition and law and order, Curtis Sliwa, and let the people decide. That's what an election is about.
Does the lesson of Melinda's race mean you're doing a big push for absentee ballots?
Of course, that's part of your get out the vote effort. We had that. I don't know what Zoran or Cuomo are doing. I know we have people going door to door, making phone calls, micro-targeting, obviously passing out literature. You see Sliwa signs all over in the outer boroughs. We're doing everything we can to get out our vote. I run across the Zoranistas all the time because I'm in their neighborhoods. I don't see the Cuomo people there. I'm in the Slope. I'm in Brooklyn Heights. I'm in Carroll Gardens. I'm in Sunset Park. I'm in Ridgewood. I'm in what was called by AOC the People's Republic of the DSA, Astoria in Athens Park. They're aggressive out there. We're aggressive. Getting millennials, getting Gen Zers, getting as many people out to vote. It's not about just blitzing information. In 1960, when I was growing up, 80% of the registered voters voted for mayor. Even in the contested Rudy Giuliani, David Dinkins race, 60% voted the first time, 57% the second time when Rudy won. It has precipitously gone down. Only 24% voted of registered voters when Adams beat me fair and square in 2021. Now, I do anticipate there'll be more people voting this time because of all the attention and the fear, the fright, and the hysteria that has surrounded this election. But imagine, 80% of the registered voters voted in the 1960s, and I can tell you why. I had civics then, I had American history, I had current events. I asked my youngest son, Hunter, recently, who luckily was accepted into Townsend, son, do they teach you current events in school? No, Daddy. Why not? They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Do they teach you civics? His mother, obviously, the DA, I've run for office now twice. No, Daddy, they don't teach civics. American history, yes. Why wouldn't they teach civics, which teaches you about government, the importance of voting, why we vote, the importance of people who are in elected positions who end up spending your money? We're not teaching a new generation that, and this way, that will probably lead to more apathy and indifference about elections. And the other thing we have to overcome is average everyday people say, why should I vote? You're all a bunch of crooks. I'm a crook. Well, Curtis, you're a politician now. I knew you before. You weren't a crook. But the moment you kissed your first baby and shook your first hand, you're just like the rest of them. You're crooked. This is what we are battling. And I am intent on battling that, putting back into the school curriculum civics, current events, focus on American history and world history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't mind our children learning about all the greatness of America, but also all the mistakes that have been made along the way. That's what I was taught. And I think we're better, well-rounded people as a result of that. We have a better understanding of what our country is, our importance, our role here, and the importance to vote. I trust the vote. I trust people to vote.
So it's 10 o'clock. I want to ask you one final question. It's a political question. Tomorrow night's the debate. Do you have a strategy for going in and winning it in a way that takes you to winning the election?
I want to address one other thing, since we're in Manhattan. I know there's talk about helping developers and the real estate industry, in developing affordable housing. Everybody's for affordable housing. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think I walk the streets more than the other two candidates combined. They don't walk the streets as much as they used to, especially Zoran. He's under threat. I get that. I'd say there's about 25 Empire State Buildings worth of usable space that's empty. You know how I can tell? You look up in the building, it's like when the South Bronx was burning, you could tell all the buildings that didn't have lights on at night, they were abandoned. Our full focus economically should be to retrofit those empty office buildings or parts of them for residential housing right here in Manhattan, where most of that empty space is. That's an answer right away that could help everybody. The construction industry, can help the realtors, can help the developers. Right here, just walking along Manhattan, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, about 25 Empire State Buildings worth of empty, unusable space because of the way work is done now. Now, your other question, I was being a politician.
Last question. You got a strategy for tomorrow night going in?
Yeah, I'm right in the middle. Oh, they're not going to like that. The camera is forced to be on me. Obviously, I'll be without beret. And I'm going to make my points. I know there's going to be a lot of hollering and hooting from both of them because they have their constituents to satisfy. And I'm going to try to, believe it or not, be the candidate who takes the high road. Why not? The people ought to have an opportunity to hear from Andrew Cuomo, who they know for years, the legacy. Zoran, who they don't know. They like him, but they don't really know him. I describe him as Bill de Blasio on steroids, because by the time he was finished, the left and the right hated him. And to hear from Curtis Sliwa, who is really the street guy, the guy who represents people in the streets. Hopefully, I'll be able to get my points in. I hope they all can get their points in. I hope it doesn't become a shouting match. And I hope the moderators understand, let the candidates speak. This is not about you. This is about the candidates and the need for voters or potential voters to make a choice. Let the candidates speak, and hopefully it's civil, so that everybody can say whatever they have to say in 2 hours, 1 hour on network TV and 1 hour online.
Terrific. You said you're going for the high road, and the high road is a good place for us to end. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me say thank you to Curtis Sliwa.
Thank you.